We're going to briefly go over some of the coloring techniques that I use for some of the shots that I'm doing for this wedding. Traditionally, obviously, you know, I always do like music videos and stuff, but pretty much it follows the same workflow. So right here we have like a brick scene in the back and everything. We see that everything is this is just a Blackmagic film to extended video. LUT that comes with the camera, comes with Davinci Resolve, so pretty standard, nothing like too customized about this. But we're going to try and dig into this color grade first. We're going to start off with the color correction. First thing I do is I take this first node here and I go ahead and label it white balance, and then the second node I'll go ahead and start with my primary wheels. So we'll go ahead and label that wheels. We'll go to this next node here and we'll start to really mess around with our colors. And then our last node here, we're going to add a D55 film LUT over it, but we're only going to add like maybe 20% strength, just enough so you can barely see it. We'll go ahead and start a first node off here too. I'm hitting Alt S to make new nodes. We can drag this node, click and hold, and then if you hold down Shift, you can just add it into the first part of the node tree here, release it onto it, and we can label this node here NR, because most likely we're going to need some sort of noise reduction, especially if you're shooting on the 4K and you like your footage to like look more shadowy, more filmic, more dark. Obviously if you have more darks in your frame, that's going to introduce a little bit of noise. So even some of the shots that you're going to see me color grading, they're going to be in the daytime. I'm still going to be using this noise reduction node right here just to clean up the image a little bit. So let's go ahead and start off with this white balance. All I do for white balance is I go over into my primary wheels, I click on this white balance eyedropper and I click on something in the frame that's white. Go ahead and click on that so we see it kind of warmed up this shot a little bit, and it looks like our tint was off a little bit into the green, so it kind of gave it just a little bit more magenta. Here's the before and here's the after. You can kind of see there's kind of like a little tint right here that it fixed. Not sure if you can see that through the YouTube compression, but I can definitely see it with my naked eye. Now that our white balance is fixed, we're going to go ahead and go over into our wheels. We're going to go ahead and look at our primary wheels, and the first thing I normally start messing with is the gamma. So I start to mess with this gamma until I get something that looks pretty much the way I want the overall image to look, and that's about good right there. So I just drag it down by 1 point. Then I always control my lift. That looks good right there. We have a lot of dark areas within this brick wall in the back, and I want to make sure that is pronounced. And then we're going to go ahead and accentuate those darks here in a minute too by going over into our log wheels. But the last thing we're going to do is go over into our gain, turn the gain up just a little bit. We don't want to turn it up too much because we're going for like a filmic look, like I said earlier. So we don't want to add too much gain into any one of these shots. Now that this looks pretty good, we're going to go ahead and go over into our color wheels, and we're going to really start to mess around with these colors. The first thing I typically do is I go to my exposure curve and I hit the red channel by just clicking on this R right here, and then I click on these three dots and go over to add default anchors. This gives you a default, default anchor locations within this exposure curve. And I take this bottom layer here and I zoom it into, if we focus in right here on this dark area in the brick, we can really see that we're starting to introduce teals into the shadows. And so obviously we don't want this, that's crazy. We're just going to introduce just a little bit of teals into the shadows and right to where it starts to fall apart, and then you just kind of back it off 1 or 2 clicks back. So this is the before and after of the color so far with our teals in the shadows. Can't really see a difference, but it will all come together here in the end. Next thing we're doing the color is we're going to go over to the hue versus hue, and we're going to go ahead and just click on all these points here along this color path here to make some default anchoring locations. And I always click on right before where the skin tone line is, right about there. Go ahead and zero that back out. And then I go ahead and click off all these except the magenta, and you'll see how that comes together here in a bit. So for the hues in the yellow, I always kind of drag it down into the minty side, mint there, and then up here on the aqua side. So I'll go over to my vector scope and I can kind of see what's going on here. What I'm really looking for is this line right here on the blues. I want it to be on the very opposite of the skin tone lines. It's pretty on this shot. But if we go over into the hue sat, we can also do the same exact thing we did for the actual hue versus hue. We'll go ahead and click on a point right before the skin tone hues right here. Go ahead and take all these away. And then we can start to kind of drag up these aquas here, just to bring a little bit more blue into the shot and then bring that back. We want the greens and the yellows to be a little bit more desaturated in this particular project. And so there we have our first step in our color grade. This is before and this is after. Not really doing too much, probably, especially since you're watching this on YouTube. It's probably honestly not looking like a whole lot is happening. But to the naked eye, I can see what's going on my screen here live. And so this looks pretty good. The last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and go over into the wheels, go back into our main exposure curve here, and I'm gonna mess around with the shadows. The main takeaway from this particular part of the tutorial is that controlling our shadows is super important. And if there's a lot of dark areas within our frame, we wanna make sure that those areas not only are representing the color we want them to represent, but that they're also free from noise as well. And so after we dial in the color, we're going to go over into our noise reduction node here, and we're going to clean up the noise within those shadows. So let's go ahead and go over back into our wheels. We're going to zoom back in to one of the dark spots on the brick wall here, probably within this line right here. You're going to start to see, as I make adjustments, you are going to see the results of those adjustments. So we can go over here into the low and low soft. These are the two settings that we're going to be messing around with. And we want to make sure our parade scopes are pulled up because we're going to be controlling everything from pretty much the 128 line and below. Okay, so right away we can see that there's, obviously this is not a low key shot, so there's not a whole lot of stuff going on in the shadows. But if we bring up this low a little bit, we can see what's going on. We can see that it's literally just kind of clipping the shadows, and subsequently it's kind of cleaning up the shadows as well. So this is really a technique that works really well with Blackmagic footage with controlling the shadows, is just by adjusting this low slider that's right here underneath soft clip. Now once we have a pretty good spot to where it doesn't look like overly done, we can go over into the low soft, and as we can see there's an abrupt line right here where it's kind of clipping off those shadows. What this low soft does is it kind of tapers it back a little bit and it kind of rolls it off, just kind of like highlight roll off, but we're just doing it within the shadows. So this is before the low soft, and I'll zoom in just a little bit more. I'm zoomed in at 600, over 600%, and if I just slowly slide this low soft up, you can see that it's just rolling off that clipping effect that we initially did with the first low slider. And so I'm gonna put it at about right here. And if you look at the bottom of the parade scopes here, you can kind of see what it's doing. Most of the time I really don't even look at the frame itself. I look at these scopes. And so I just want to do it to where it just starts to barely roll them off just like that. And so we're going to zoom it back out and see exactly what we've done. We're going to turn the wheels node on and off so we can really see that this is making our shadows nice and clean and palatable. So let's go over to our noise reduction tab, and the last thing we're going to do is we're going to zoom back into one of these shadow areas within the brick, and we can kind of see there's a little bit of noise going on, not a whole lot. So most of the noise we see is like pretty much in the mid-tone area within the bricks, but we're going to clean that up a little bit in the noise reduction node. So we're going to go ahead and go over into the noise reduction portion of our motion effects down here on the bottom right. Normally, I typically do temporal noise reduction, but the spatial threshold seems to work just fine for most footage. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and start off with 6 here, and we're gonna look at the screen and see what it does when I add it. So you can see it just cleared all of that noise up right here. And if I kind of frame this out so we can see, if we turn it off and then on, zoom it in just a little more, this is off, and then this is on. Okay, so it's pretty much just disappeared completely. So if we zoom back out, if we turn that noise reduction on and off, we really can't see a whole lot of difference, but I promise you when this renders out and exports out in your final project, you will notice the difference, especially when after you upload it to YouTube and it goes through YouTube compression, you're gonna notice that your shadows come out really clean. So the last thing I'm gonna do is go ahead and go over to this D55 film grade node that we made here. We're gonna make sure it's highlighted, go over into our LUTs, and we're gonna look under film looks. These are all LUTs that are provided to you within Davinci Resolve. So just click on film looks, and for this particular project, we're gonna be choosing something called D55. Straight off, you can see that it's too strong, so we double click it and apply it. The first thing I do is go ahead and go over to this masking node right here. Click on it, turn the key output all the way down so it's completely off. We always want to see what our footage looks like without anything added, especially when we're adding LUTs. Now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of zoom it in just a little bit so we can kind of see what's going on just a little bit better. And we're going to slowly crank up this gain until it looks like it's something that's realistic. Okay, so this is off, this is fully on. And so we can see that our happy medium is probably gonna live somewhere in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop it there. That's 30% on this particular film grade LUT. And like I said before, this is a Kodak D55. This LUT I've noticed works really well just kind of on dramatic looking filmic projects that you want to have looking good for a client. 55 gives it kind of that emotional feel to it. And so straight off, we can go over to that node and we can turn it off and then turn it on, and we can just see what it's doing to our footage here. See, that's adding just a little bit more reds into the bricks. Okay, and as well is also adding just a little bit more contrast within those bricks in the background as well. Now, just to add a little bit more character to this footage, sometimes I like to either add a glow effect or a film grain effect. So I'm gonna show you guys how I do that. The first thing I'm gonna do is add a glow node for this particular shot. It doesn't look like glow is really going to be useful, but I'm just gonna show you how I do it anyway. And so I added another node here called glow. I'm gonna go ahead and hit Alt S, open up another node, and we're gonna call this grain. So for this initial glow node, we're going to search in the effects here for glow, and this should be the first thing that pops up. Go ahead and click over, drag it on till we can see that it's affecting this bottom right portion of the frame here. So like I said, I'm probably not going to use glow in the final project for this, but I'm just going to show you how I do it. Like I was talking about earlier, if you are using effects like glow or LUT, you want to make sure that the effect is turned off even after you apply it, so you can see what it looks like without the effect at all. And then you can slowly start to dial it up as I never overdo anything, so I literally just drag it up until I can start to see it kind of affect the footage a little bit, just like right there. And so this is off and this is on, and then we can go over into the spread, turn it completely off so we can see which highlights this glow is going to be affecting. So if we turn off spread, you can see literally that it just condenses down into just the areas that we are defining within this shine threshold here. So if we go ahead and turn this spread up, we could turn this spread up so that it looks a little bit more kind of dreamy. And so that looks about good right there. And then we're gonna go ahead and zoom out. And then this is with the effect off, and then this is with the effect on. So it just kind of adds just a little bit of glow to this highlighted portion of the cloth here. But like I said, in the final project, I don't think I'm gonna use it for this particular clip, but I will use it on some of the other clips. The last thing I'm gonna talk about is grain, and this is super simple. We can just literally hit on this grain node that we made, type in grain, and then hit enter. And then the first and the only thing that pops up is film grain. Click, drag it on over to the node. And then we're gonna go ahead and use something called 35mm 400T. We're gonna zoom in probably just to some mid-tone area of the frame, most likely this brick. And we're gonna take this gain strength and we're gonna crank it all the way up. Now the thing with grain is I always crank it up all the way, and then I always crank it down. That way I can kind of see where my middle line is going to be. So right about there, you can kind of see that it's adding a little bit more texture to the bricks. Go ahead and turn it off again. This is completely off. This is at 100% strength. And so I'm just going to taper it back just a little bit. With the grain, I always like to start off with the grain strength at 0 and then slowly crank it up just to where I can barely see the grain start to take effect on the midtones. Go ahead and zoom that back out. This is with the grain off, this is with the grain on. You're not gonna see too much of a difference on this screen, but like I said, when you export it, you most definitely will see the grain. And so if we look at this whole complete shot, we can see everything that we did. If we just turn everything off and then turn everything back on, we're just go ahead and turn this glow node off here since I'm not gonna be using that like I said earlier. So this is on, and this is with no color correction or color grading at all. Quick bonus. We can add a subtle tint to the entire timeline to add some continuity to the project by simply adding in a color generator. We'll go ahead and drag that over on to the timeline. I go ahead and open up the color picker here, and what I do is for this project specifically, we're gonna go ahead and go with like a teal greenish look. And so we'll go ahead and drag that all the way up. We're gonna go ahead and apply it and then go over into settings, and we are going to drag the opacity all the way down and then slowly start to drag it up until we could just see a small amount of that color start to bleed through. The result that we get is a really subtle kind of teal tint over our entire footage, and it's just so subtle that you could barely even notice it. The only way you would notice it is the fact that I'm actually pointing it out to you. We can see the colored utensils here, and if we turn this solid color layer off and on, we can see that it just adds a slight teal tint to the entire footage. The cool thing is that even the footage that is black will kind of have this complementary color within the darks. Some of the footage that you may use will actually have like maybe a title template, and then it may actually fade out into a black screen like this. But the cool part about it is even this black image has a teal tint to it as well. We can see that in this footage here, all these shadowy areas in the back have a teal tint to them caused by this solid color that we just applied to it. This is what it looks like with it off, and then this is what it looks like with it on. If you guys have any questions on anything you saw in this video, make sure to leave me a comment and I'll try my best to answer whatever questions that you guys have within the comments below. If you like content like this, where we just go over really simple grades, quick turnaround times, but the footage looks super professional, be sure to check out some of the other videos on this channel. But that's all for this video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see y'all in my next one. Peace.